Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a little bit of a special review. This is going to be review number 1600, and as I always do with these mini milestone reviews, I just want to kick off by giving a huge shout out and thank you to you guys, the viewers. You know, it's been a great journey over the last 7.5 years. I started this channel up in July of 2013 and it's just crazy to see how much it's grown and how many great beers we've managed to try over those 7.5 years. So to you guys who have watched, a huge and heartfelt thank you, whether you've liked, subscribed, shared, commented, you know, been on one of the live streams with us, sent me some beer recommendations, given me some beer, showed me around wherever I've been in the world. Just a massive thank you. You guys are a huge part of the reason that I've continued this for so long, and I would say, yeah, the viewers and all the recommendations, along with my fellow beer tubers, the community that's behind this whole beer tube thing is what it's all about for me. And you know, along the way, of course, we've got to try some crazy beers from different parts of the world. It's been a great journey, and it will continue indefinitely. You know, I've got no intentions of stopping this. This channel will go until I drop, basically, and hopefully that's quite a time in the future. But we never know. As I always say, Odin's watching, he'll decide. But yeah, whatever. We just live life as it comes. That's how it goes. But yeah, I hope that you guys continue to enjoy the videos over the next while. I will publish a channel message video at some stage soon. I need to sit down and film that and put together all the things that I want to say in it. But yeah, I will update you on the channel plans for 2021. We've got some really interesting things coming up that I'm sure that you guys will enjoy, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But one other thing about this review is that it's also quite cool to be able to film one of these milestone reviews for you in Scotland again. I think the last one would have been either review number 400 or 500. I'm sure I started the Swedish reviews when I was, you know, 500 or so in, come to think of it. But yeah, it's crazy. As I say, July 2013 was when I started up the channel, and I've not lived in Scotland since January of 2014. So it's been 7 years that I've been away from Scotland, which is just utter craziness to think about as well. So yeah, nice to be filming this milestone review for you here in the motherland of Scotland. And for this review, I think we've got a beer that's very fitting for the occasion. So we're going to have a look at a very fine example, apparently, of my native beer style, the wee heavy Scotch ale. You know, 160 shilling, 90 shilling, whatever you want to call it. We'll talk about that in the video. But this one is also a collaboration beer. The home brewery is actually from very close to where I used to study, up in Aberdeen, and the away brewery is from very close to my hometown here in central Scotland, Stirling. So yeah, I think this one will be a pretty damn awesome beer. So for this review then, we are going to head up to Dyce, just to the northwest of the city of Aberdeen, where I used to study chemistry, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Fierce Beer. So this one is called Heavy on the Bourbon. It's a bourbon barrel aged Scotch ale, wee heavy, whatever you want to call it, coming in at 9% ABV, and this one is brewed in collaboration with Fallon Brewing, who are from Kippen, just to the northwest of my hometown of Stirling, pretty much right in the middle of Scotland actually. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another nice beer, and it is nice to review a Scotch ale for you here in Scotland, of course. The last Scotch ale I think I reviewed that was filmed here in Scotland was the Old Parochial, if I remember rightly, from Tempest Brewing, and that's still probably the best Scottish brewed Scotch ale that I've come across, at least within the sort of more American style, if you like, the more American craft type style. There's some very good examples of Scotch ales in Scotland, of course. Old Parochial is one that really springs to mind. You've got the various different beers from Tracker House, they've got some great stuff in there, and yeah, there's various other ones that don't quite come to mind at the moment, but yeah, some really great Scotch ales, both of the more traditional variety and of the new wave sort of American style craft variety here in Scotland as well. We've got a very strong beer scene here at the moment, which is absolutely great. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff going on in Scotland, and these two breweries have done some very good stuff over the years as well. So nice to feature them both on the channel once again. Fierce Beer from Dyce and Fallon Brewing from Kippen. Great breweries, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. I'm just excited to review another Scotch ale for you here on the channel. I always enjoy these, and I enjoy trying these from different parts of the world as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one. A very fitting beer for beer review number 1600. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both breweries here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites and links to the lists of my other Fierce Fierce Beer reviews and my other Fallon Brewing reviews. You will no doubt see more added to those lists at some point in the near future, either in February or September when I'm home next. But there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, or being added to whenever I can at the moment, but I am at home in the motherland of Scotland. So at the moment, it's being added to rather regularly, I should say. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the breweries in this one then, and we'll kick off with Fierce Beer since they are the home brewery in this instance. So Fierce Beer, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Dyce to the northwest of the city of Aberdeen, and they began life as the home brewing experiments of David Grant, who had worked for many years in the oil industry. But he'd been homebrewing since March of 2013, and after hosting a beer and food pairing dinner in May of 2015, he decided to turn professional, and the main reason was that his beer received rave reviews from his guests. But David is joined at the brewery by Dave McGarry, who also worked in the oil industry for a number of years, but when he was made redundant during the whole oil price crash back in, what was that, 2013, 2014, he used his redundancy package to put himself on a brewing course at Brew Lab in Sunderland, which is quite a popular route into craft brewing, along with the brewing and distilling programme at Heriot Watt in Edinburgh. But these guys have been doing very well over the last few years. In April of 2016, they moved into the brewery in the Kirkhill Industrial Estate in Dyce to the northwest of Aberdeen, quite close to Aberdeen Airport, and there they can brew around 800,000 litres of beer per year. They started canning their beers in early 2018, and they now have their own bar on Ship Row in Aberdeen, which is called the Fierce Bar, and they want to move the brewery to a more central location in the city actually, and have a big brewery restaurant type place, basically a big kind of American themed thing that you'll find from some of these more rural breweries, if you like, you know, like Toppling Goliath and all of this sort of thing. There is one place in Aberdeen I can think where that might be possible. There's an old factory complex right in the middle of the city actually, which would be really cool if they could take over and convert it, but I'm not sure how likely that is. You know, rents and stuff in Aberdeen are crazily expensive. But in addition to the bar in the in Ship Row in Aberdeen, they also have one in Edinburgh these days, and there's now one in Manchester as well apparently. I don't think there's one in Glasgow yet, so that maybe will be the next place that they'll go for one of them. But yeah, I do need to go and visit the one in Edinburgh at some stage, and when I make it up to Aberdeen next time, I will film an out and about video at the Fierce Bar, and I also need to go and film one at the original Brewdog bar as well actually. So yeah, those two videos are definitely on the cards the next time I go to Aberdeen, as well as 6 Degrees North. Of course, there's some great beer up in the northeast of Scotland these days, which is very good. But as of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 140 different kinds of beer, and they also produce gin these days as well. When it comes to Fierce Beer, if people ask me, you know, what beers to try from these guys, the first things that always come to mind are the big imperial stouts, imperial porters, and stuff like this, but also the fruity sours. So a Scotch ale is not a style that you'll commonly find from Fierce Beer. Recently I also reviewed the Fierce Pilsner as well, which was quite interesting, and I do like trying different styles of beer that breweries are not so well known for, and yeah, Fierce Beer in my mind are a very capable brewery actually, so definitely one of the ones that you want to check out. I had a New England IPA from these guys as well, which was pretty good, and you'll see that review appear a little bit later on. But yeah, a very good brewery. They do seem to be exporting their beer fairly widely across the European continent these days, so if you get the chance to try some, I highly recommend that you do. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Fierce Beer for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, on to the away brewery then, Fallon Brewing. So Fallon Brewing was established by Paul Fallon and his wife Karen, and Paul is a former home brewer turned professional, as many brewers are. But they bought the brewery site back in 2012, and it can be found in the old engine shed part of the old Kippen railway station near Stirling. It's actually closer to Callander, actually to the northwest of the city, and it's in the vicinity of the Fintry Hills and Gargunnock. Very, very beautiful part of the country actually, that I do recommend you go and take a drive out into if you find yourself in Scotland. Not a lot of people leave Edinburgh when they come to Scotland, of course, but it's a bit of a shame because my hometown Stirling is very, very historic. So come to Stirling, take a little drive around, go up in the Highlands and things. Just be aware that the roads are very long and the distances and time that you need to drive these things is a lot further than you'd think. Yeah. Very beautiful part of the country that these guys are from. But the station, Kippen Station, actually closed in 1934. But at one stage in time, it was one of the busiest on the Forth and Clyde Railway because of 2 local creameries, a sandstone quarry and a tile and brick factory. And there was also 2 manor houses there as well, and also various tourists just coming to kind of walk in the hills and things, which was pretty cool. But yeah, once it was quite a bustling station apparently. But initially, to reduce the startup costs of the brewery and also to determine what size of brew kit they wanted to buy, Paul initially brewed his beers under contract at Traditional Scottish Ale, which is now the Black Wolf Brewery in Throsk, which is near Stirling as well, and the first beers were produced at their own brewery in April of 2014. They continued to expand this brewery over the following years, and over the course of 2016 they built a new brewery building right next to the one right next to the train station, of course, and this has basically increased the capacity quite substantially. They installed a canning line in early 2017, and they've just gradually scaled up the brewery infrastructure within this building over the last few years. But apparently all of the beers are vegetarian and vegan friendly. The brewery runs off 100% green energy too, which is pretty cool, and as of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced just over 20 different kinds of beers. If I remember rightly, Fallon Brewing have a core range of about 8 or so beers. I've had some really, really good things from these guys over the years. Probably my 2 beers that I would always recommend from these guys would be the Platform C, which is a lovely West Coast type IPA. I really, really like that one, and also the Choo Choo, which is kind of, Choo Choo is a little bit of an icon, I think, of Scottish craft brewing. It's one of the best low alcohol sweet stouts that you'll find in Scotland, and it is a core range brew, so you can find that wherever you go. I think it was actually produced as a limited edition at one stage, but it proved to be like massively popular. But yeah, Platform C and Choo Choo would be the 2 beers I would recommend that you try, and at some stage I do need to make a review of the Odyssey and the Odyssey, which is their blonde ale, and also the Mainline, which is their New England hazy IPA. But very recently I reviewed the Odyssey Pilsner, and that was a really nice example of the beer, of that beer style as well. Very, very authentic and really nicely done. But that's what you'll get from Fallon Brewing in my experience. A really good brewery, and you know, I quite like it. These guys are a bit different in the sense that they don't experiment as much as others, but they do have a very, very solid core range in my mind. But yeah, great little brewery, and one that I do hope I can try a few more beers from in the fairly near future. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Fallon Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers as well. But yeah, 2 very, very good Scottish breweries involved in this one, and I hope that I can feature these guys on Meet the Brewery segments at some stage. Maybe we can get that done this year. I'll need to get in contact with the breweries and see what we can do. You'll probably most likely see Fallon first, and you know, as I say, if we can sort something out with the guys from Fierce Beer, that would be pretty damn awesome as well, actually, because I've had quite a few beers from them now too. But yeah, cool to see them collaborating as well. This is the first collaboration I've had involving these 2 breweries together, which is very, very nice. But yeah, as I was telling you at the start of the video, this one is a 9% Scotch ale, aged in bourbon barrels for 6 months apparently, and yeah, I think it should be very, very interesting. This one was apparently produced for St Andrew's Day of 2021, I think, but the can of course does look a little bit, or St Andrew's Day of 2020 I should say, sorry, and the best before in this one is 2021. But yeah, as I say, really cool to see these guys collaborating once again. I don't know if this beer's been produced, you know, if they put different vintages of this out in different years, because when I saw this one, there was something just familiar about it. I think this beer maybe has been released every year, to be honest. And this can, with the amount of kind of scratches and things that it's got, it does look as if it's maybe been sitting around a little bit, to be honest with you. But as a Scotch ale at 9%, you don't have to worry about that too much. But yeah, I think this one should be really nice. But I'll just have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open up. As you can see, it's typical for one of these kind of prototype small batch beers that you'll see from Fierce. 440ml can, this one. It says on the back here, heavy on the bourbon. This classic malty wee heavy has been left to rest in bourbon barrels for 6 months. Expect soft bourbon vanillins on the nose, smooth caramel and malt on the palate, and a slight boozy kick. We love this beer and we hope you do too. 9% ABV Scotch ale. So yeah, this looks pretty cool. I'm not sure why on the can it doesn't mention it's a collaboration with Fallon Brewing, but yeah, it is listed as a collaboration with Fallon on the thing, and it does. I think you can see if you look at some of the older pictures of this, it does say that the original one was a collaboration with Fallon, so it's definitely right to give them credit for this beer as well. But yeah, it certainly looks very, very nice, this one, on the artwork. Plain top on it there. So without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So yeah, as I always do with the Scotch ales, because I quite enjoy them, this can just got a little bit excited as we opened it up. I'm just letting it settle. Got a wee bit on my hands, but not too much, not too much. So we'll just, there we go, I think it's okay. We'll just let this guy calm down and we can put it into the glass. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, as I always do with these Scotch ale reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the Scotch ales. So the term Scotch ale, and I think wee heavy, or probably more accurately wee heavy, it was, as far as I can tell, it was coined by the Americans when this beer style was taken over to the States. And as I've told you, when the Americans get a hold of old world beer styles, usually what happens is the fruits become a little bit juicier and sweeter, and of course the malt base becomes bigger and juicier. They're kind of bigger and sweeter as well. It's just how it goes with these kinds of beer. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened with the Scotch ales. They went over to America. They became known as the wee heavies. But traditionally speaking, in Scotland, these beers were known as shilling beers. So basically, shilling was the unit that was used along with the pound sterling before it was decimalised. But basically, you had 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shillings, shilling beers. So essentially what happened, the shilling, it's like a slash and then a line next to it. So you had these beers, and it was basically referring to the tax on the alcohol in these beers. So the tax, I think to be specific, was on the malt content, but obviously as you have more malt in the beer, progressively you will have to pay more tax because of more alcohol and things like this. But anyway, basically, as you went up the scale, the beers got gradually more malty and boozy, and what is kind of referred to as a Scotch ale in America these days is usually you know, a 90 shilling, equivalent of a 90 shilling. But in some places you can get a 160 shilling. The Trackier House, 160 shilling is a Scottish brewed example of that, and basically that's just a big malty boozy beast of a thing. But yeah, it's hard to give you an exact alcohol percentage and things because it does vary from brewery to brewery, but essentially, yeah, the higher the shilling number, if you like, the boozier the beer is going to be. But in America they've got what they call a Scottish ale, which is like a, you know, a 50, 60 sort of shilling, and then, you know, maybe pushing 70 shilling. But then the Scotch ale wee heavies are called you know, usually those are the 80 and 90 shillings, and sometimes the 160s. But yeah, that's a basic summary, if you like, of the kind of Scotch ales, if you like. But yeah, this one I have to say looks really, really damn impressive actually. You can see that when we poured this beer it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of very light beige fawn coloured head. That of course has faded away. The beer did get a little bit excited when I opened it up, and it was, you know, rock solid. The can was absolutely rock solid when I pulled it out earlier, so I maybe should have just, you know, taken the pressure off it before starting the video, of course, but you know, sometimes that happens. But yeah, as you can see with this beer, this is one of the darker Scotch ales I've come across in recent times. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on a few different things, well, mainly two. One, it's the type of malts that you use in the malt base, but two, it is the length of the boil. And usually a big heavy Scotch ale at 9% like this, it's going to have like a 4, 5, 6 hour boil on it. The longer that you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. But at the same time, remember, it is down to the exact type of malts that you use in the in that malt base there. But yeah, that's another summary of it for you. But this one is definitely one of the darker ones that I've come across recently. If I shine the light through this one is pretty much like a kind of Pepsi, Cola type colour. It's got that lovely kind of dark, it really is very, very dark and kind of ebony ebony wood type colour, to be honest with you. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the kind of surface there, and it is just a very, very kind of clean surface actually, which is really, really quite nice. So the head is just faded away on this one, but when it's 9% ABV and it's barrel aged, you would kind of expect that, to be honest with you. But yeah, in terms of appearance, quite a dark one, but not too far away from the big noise that I had from Cigar City Brewing in Florida recently. So this one does look as if it might be more of an American type Scotch ale, but I think in fairness the old Parochial from Tempest was quite dark like this as well. But it certainly is not out of the realms of possibility. From appearance, I would say this one looks more like a 160 shilling beer, this one. But yeah, certainly looks the part. Let's have a look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Yeah, straight away with this beer, it's the bourbon barrel aging, absolutely. So yeah, very, very woody and almost slightly leathery smelling beer, this one, I have to say. But yeah, as I've told you before in other reviews, when it comes to Scotch whisky and American bourbon, the main difference would be the level of sweetness that you get from American bourbon, and it's the same with the beers. The American beers are always a bit sweeter than the traditional Scottish ones, of course, but yeah, you can really smell that big woody oaky backbone to the beer. There's a little bit of the vanilla coming out there, but to me this one almost comes across as a little bit leathery in a sense, but you can smell those kind of brown sugary notes, those quite sweet brown sugary notes of the bourbon in there. So yeah, it's a really interesting aroma that you get out of this one. I'm surprised at just how leathery it is as well. There really is a kind of leathery component to this one sitting on top of that big oaky wood. But yeah, just craziness. Yeah, just absolutely mental, to be quite honest. Smells like a lovely, lovely beer, this one, but it's the barrel aging that dominates the aroma in this one, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, you do get quite a nice bit of brown sugar out of this one. You can smell that big treacly molasses kind of note there. You do get a wee bit of the kind of brown bready sort of things that you would expect out of a Scotch ale, of course. But I really like how this beer goes together in that sense as well. But yeah, the brown sugars in this beer are, really, really nice. The more you do get more and more of the kind of lighter bourbon notes out of this. The thing you've always got to remember with barrel aging is that it's going to take away from the mouthfeel a little bit, and quite often, they give you these big infused, aromas and flavours in the beer. But this one, it's the barrel aging that really dominates in this one. You get very little in the way of hoppy character out of this beer, other than a little bit of earthiness and a little bit of floral and grassiness. So yeah, most of the hops at 6 months in the barrel will have dropped out of this beer, but it certainly works quite nicely for it. The fruity side of this beer is quite nice. Some black currants in there, a little bit of a more oily blackberry to the beer as well. Some figs, maybe a little bit like kind of juicier plum too. So the fruits on this one are quite nice, but it just surprises me that there's not quite as big a kind of more caramelly and molassesy sort of thing. Those notes actually do take a little bit of a back seat in favour of the more kind of barrel aged notes. So yeah, the aroma in this beer is it smells surprisingly light. You'd expect this beer to just be a little bit more kind of oily and big in its aroma, but then again, as I say, if you barrel age these beers, you sacrifice a little bit of the kind of thickness and things like that from it. But yeah, it's got a really interesting aroma to it, this one. Lots of leathery and woody notes. It's the barrel aging that pushes its way out, as I said. But yeah, I think this one should make for a very, very interesting beer. So yeah, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one for yourself before you get stuck into it. I think it's very, very interesting. So yeah, let's just have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the heavy on the bourbon, a 9% barrel aged Scotch ale, wee heavy, whatever you want to call it, from Fierce Beer in Dyce, just next to Aberdeen, in collaboration with Fallon Brewing from Kippen, just outside of my hometown of Stirlingshire in central Scotland. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and thank you for all your support over the 1600 beer reviews and the last 7.5 years. Slàinte, Skål. Oh yeah. That's pretty damn nice, I have to say. The carbonation is a little bit active in this one, so I'm guessing this can has maybe been sitting for a little while. Either that or it's been agitated a little bit. But yeah, I've got a feeling this can might well be like a year and a bit old. I think there is, and that's probably there's probably a wee bit of extra fermentation going on in this one, so maybe it's even a little bit boozier than 9%. But yeah, the carbonation is just a little bit too much in it, but the flavour profile is really, really nice. Yeah. Although, the more that you drink of it, the more it does kind of mellow out a little bit. But yeah, this is it's a very, very nice beer, actually. I think they've done this really quite well. But yeah, it's all about the barrel aging, and it's actually a remarkably kind of slick Scotch ale when you ignore the sort of carbonation element that's going on in here. But yeah, it does get a thumbs up from me, this one. This is all about, when they say heavy on the bourbon, that's probably a fitting name for it, because it really does lean towards that barrel aging. I've only just made that connection with it, thinking about this aroma for a wee while. But yeah, I've only just made that connection now. But yeah, this is very nicely done. It's quite different to other Scotch ales I've come across, I have to say. So yeah, if you get the chance to try this, I think you will enjoy it for sure. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? So straight away with this beer, as you go across the middle of your palate, you can feel that nice kind of smooth, oaky, woody quality. That blankets the middle of your tongue there, and it also spreads into the back third of your palate as well. But yeah, it's very, very smooth actually. The woody base that this beer has is very, very interesting and just ridiculously smooth. What I would say about this one is that the beer, it's not the most complex of Scotch ales that I've come across. It's actually, quite straight shooting in its barrel aging, which is interesting, but I think that plays along to the charm of it a little bit. So yeah, you can feel that smooth woody note. Like I say, if you go to the front half of that middle third of your tongue, there's a wee bit more kind of vanilla coming out of it, and yeah, that works out very, very nicely. Yeah, the fruity side of this is really nice as well. I think the fruity side has one of the more complex parts of the beer, but yeah, the malty side of things is quite, straight shooting. The leathery notes that I was picking out in the aroma don't really come out in the flavour, in fairness. It is far, far more woody than this one. You do get a few wee tobacco-y elements in there, I think, rather than leathery notes, which is quite interesting. But yeah, so as I say, middle of your palate is blanketed with this nice kind of smooth, oaky, woody sort of thing. As you move towards the front half, of that front third of your palate there, or the front half of the middle third of your palate, as you wake up to as you move towards the front half of that middle third of your palate, you definitely get the vanilla notes out of it. You can feel a little bit of a kind of tobacco-y flavour kind of sitting under that as well, which is quite interesting. But yeah, as you go towards the back third of the palate, it's got a nice, how would you say, it definitely has a little bit of a more, you get a little bit of graininess out of this one. You can definitely feel a little bit of the kind of breadiness of the original unbarrel aged beer on the back third of your palate. But yeah, the wood is there, it sits on top of the kind of brown bready sort of thing. There is a little bit of that there on a few of the kind of grainy things, but that gradually smooths out as you move further and further forward in this one. On top of the kind of smoothness of the wood, that's when you get the kind of brown sugary notes from the bourbon sitting in there as well. But if you go to the very centre of your palate, you can definitely pick up you definitely get a wee bit of the kind of more treacly molasses sort of thing from the original Scotch ale as well, which is quite interesting. Part of the colour of this beer as well, because it is going to be down to the barrel aging, so that's maybe something I should have mentioned earlier on as well. Is it depends, the colour can be affected by barrel aging and stuff like this too. But the brown sugars in the middle of the palate here from the beer itself, rather than the kind of barrel aging, are not madly heavy, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of that is maybe because it's, as they say, it's heavy on the bourbon. It's maybe this beer is designed to sort of take in more of the infused flavours from the wood, rather than give off the flavours of the original beer. It would be interesting to try the original beer that they used before the barrel aging, but I'm not sure if that's something that's ever been released. But yeah, it's an interesting beer, this one. It's a really interesting example of the style, and it's one of the more, as I say, it's one of the ones that I've had that really is more heavily leaning towards the barrel aged elements than the original beer itself, actually, and that makes me very curious, to be honest. So yeah, a wee bit of a kind of heavy treacle thing in the centre of your palate, and as you move further out from that, it just gradually mellows out a little bit, and you start to get a wee bit of a lighter kind of sweet caramelly thing. But then yes, the brown sugars that you get out of this beer are quite dark from the actual beer itself, but the bourbon kind of brown sugars that sit underneath are kind of what you would expect. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered the malty side of this beer as much as we really need to. The malty barrel aging side of things, to be honest, I think we've covered that. If you move towards the kind of back corners of your palate, you will get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. You're always going to get that in Scotch ales, of course, but as you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal quality, and it stays fairly smooth as you go further forward towards the front corners of your palate. There's a tiny little bit of floral aromaticity out of this one. I would guess that maybe there's a wee bit of Bramling's Cross in this one. There is something that tells me there might be an English hop in here. It could of course be something like one of the American hops like Summit or Williamette, or something like this. The other one would be Northern Brewer from Germany, which is quite quite commonly used for Doppelbock, and there is something that's a little bit more old world about the fruitiness in this beer rather than New World and American, to be honest with you, which is interesting. But yeah, around the front curve of the palate, it's definitely a little bit lighter and more grassy in that sense. But yeah, most of the hoppy elements have dropped out of this beer. When it's been in the barrel for 6 months, that's not surprising, and I do suspect that this can might be a year old, come to think of it as well. But yeah, that I think is the other thing. That I think what's caused the carbonation, because I find it hard to believe that a beer, a Scotch ale brewed this year would have a best before date of the 27th of the 11th 2021. I think they would put it in the can for at least 2 years. I think they would recommend 2 years, so I think this can is maybe a year old. Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely situation with this one, or scenario that I can think of. But yeah, on the front third of your palate then, as I always say, that's where you get that nice oily, that kind of nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. This one, I think this is where the beer really shows a little bit of complexity, and I will say that on that border between the middle third and front third of your palate, you get a few little almost kind of cakey, Christmassy pudding kind of things in there, but then underneath you can get the smoothness of the wood as well, which is quite nice. But let's focus on those fruity esters for just now. So when you take this beer in, you get a little bit of that kind of plummy, I would say, yeah, kind of plummy, almost very slightly raisiny note out of it. Very quickly, as you move further, on the back of that front third of your palate, yeah, it's quite plummy and raisiny, but as you move further forward, it definitely gets a little touch more kind of figgy, if you like, and then as you reach the kind of front half, pardon me, of that front third of your tongue, that's when you get the kind of soft, juicy blackcurrant sitting there, and the more oily blackberry kind of sitting on top of it, actually. And the further you go into the aftertaste, it does lean a little bit more towards that kind of blackcurrant and the lighter figgy note, actually. So yeah, the fruity notes are quite soft in this one, I would say, and it is just a little bit sort of Bramling's Cross like. This beer, the fruits you get out of this one really remind me of some of the English barley wines and stuff. Had a soft kind of Bramling's Cross, or maybe maybe a Northern Brewer Doppelbock type fruitiness there, but definitely not as oily as you're going to get in a Doppelbock, in fairness. They are just very, very light and very juicy. I think this beer does get drier the further that you go into the aftertaste with it, so that's another interesting point to take away from this one. But when they say heavy on the bourbon, definitely are. This is one of the ones that really leans towards that barrel-aged, infused type flavour. So this is interesting compared to others that I've had before, absolutely. But yeah, a really quirky beer, this one. So thumbs up to both Fierce and Fallon for this one. I think it is pretty interesting for sure. But yeah, let's leave the flavour profile for that. I think we've described it fairly in depth. Let's have a look at the mouthfeel. So I would say that this beer, for a 9%er, it's actually, I would describe this as being right in the middle of the spectrum. It's actually quite light-bodied for for what kind of beer it is. As I said, this beer is a little bit over carbonated because I think it's been in the can for quite a wee while. I think this is maybe a year and a quarter old or something like that, so it might just be that, but the beer has a wee bit of carbonation. I would say that it's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation does give it a bit of smoothness, and like I say, it's almost got a little bit of that kind of doppelbock lightness to it rather than the bigger, more ale-like oiliness that you would expect of a Scotch ale. So it's kind of quite similar in a lot of ways to, pardon me, taking a bit of the gas down there the wrong way. It is a little bit more similar to a doppelbock in terms of its mouthfeel, to be honest with you, rather than an ale. So yeah, that's an interesting point. But on the hoppy bitterness side of things, yeah, very little bitterness to this beer. What, 20 IBUs, something like that, not a lot. But yeah, the malty side of things, very kind of slick because of how prominent the barrel aging flavours are. The barrel aging components are. There's a nice little bit of sweetness to it, quite a heavy, you know, highly caramelised treacle molasses sort of thing going on in this beer for sure. A little bit of hoppy character to this one, but not a lot, you know. 20 IBUs at the absolute most, like I said. Probably the really nice part of this beer that I very much like is the fruity side of things. Quite an old world Bramlin's Cross or Doppelbock fruitiness to it, rather than, you know, Summit or Williamette or even Simcoe can be used in beers like this and give you some red fruits. So yeah, this is a very, very interesting one for me. When they say heavy on the bourbon, they really do mean it. This one is all about the kind of barrel aged elements. So yeah, at 9% as well, it actually does feel a little bit boozier than it is, and it's not often that you kind of say that in review. Most of the time it's that the beer covers its booziness very, very well. But yeah, this one does show it a little bit because of how prominent the kind of infused flavours are. But it's an interesting one, and that's what we want. After 1600 reviews, you want a beer that's going to test your palate a bit, and this one certainly has. So thumbs up to both Fierce and Fallon for this one, absolutely. But yeah, have a go at this one for yourself and see what you think. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So yeah, as always with my reviews, thank you for watching. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Fierce and Fallon Brewing. This has been a really interesting one to review, especially for review number 1600. I hope you enjoyed this. Nice to return to both of these breweries as well, especially when they are very close to two places that are very, you know, special in my heart here in Scotland. Dyce in Aberdeen and Kippen in near Stirling. Basically my kind of two hometowns, if you like, I would say. But yeah, awesome beer this one. The heavy on the bourbon, 9% ABV, Scotch ale, aged in bourbon barrels for 6 months, brewed at Fierce Beer in Dyce in Aberdeen in collaboration with Fallon Brewing from Kippen in Stirlingshire, here in central Scotland. A crazy, crazy beer, this one, all about the barrel aged notes, but the kind of name gives you the idea. I can see exactly why they named it as they did. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from both Fierce and Fallon, and I will catch you guys very soon. This is an awesome beer to review, and I thank you for your support over the last 7.5 years. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you on the next one.